Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, April 11th. We are joined by our all-star panel of top local journalists, Margaux Lovely of the Santa Barbara Independent. Ryan P. Cruz is sitting next to her. He's also at the Independent. You can probably guess that from the setup, and Josh Molina, man of mystery and many hats, and host of the popular local podcast Santa Barbara Talks. Thank you all for being here. Margo, you had a long day yesterday. The Coastal Commission was into actually a long couple of days, I'm guessing, but the issue of Sable Oil's, I guess, the unending issue of Sable Oil's attempt to restart the pipeline that caused the Refugio oil spill in 2015. It was before the commission, big turnout, and in the end, the Coastal Commission was kind of angry at them.
Yes, they were very angry. Increased the fine by $3 million type of angry.
So, what's the total fine now?
8 million 22,500.
18.
18. Thank you. That's important. So yeah,
Okay.
over $18 million.
And they continue to, the company just continues to thumb their nose at it. Every time I drive by there, there's like more, backhoes and front end
Yes.
loaders.
I'm interested to see if I'm actually going to drive by there today, probably. I'm interested to see if they're working on there today. After the third cease and desist order and that fine. I'm not sure if they're planning on holding off. They've said that they're looking into all options in terms of compliance. So that doesn't exactly give you a lot of confidence that they will comply entirely. So
Yeah,
we'll
it seems like they're taking a very Trumpian pathway here and saying, okay, let's see you enforce it. Um, I've kind of lost track of all the various venues where this is being heard, but is there litigation now going on between the commission and Sable where this would be an issue?
There is whether or not this exact point would be an issue is kind of to be determined. The lawsuit between Sable and the Coastal Commission is seeking an injunction and some declaratory relief in saying that the commission just simply does not have jurisdiction here and they're completely overreaching into the county's jurisdiction. But the county hasn't exactly been super present and forthcoming on the issue. So it's kind of tough to discern where exactly that lawsuit will land.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. And at the risk of sounding like one of those theater critic political writers, and of getting in Josh's lane. I want to say I thought Megan Harmon was the star of the show yesterday, and she really articulated that point. What the hell is the county doing? The county has given the sign off on this permit and said the permit granted in 1827 or whenever it was originally is fine for them to do all this work, which is obviously beyond the scope of that permit, and refuses to explain itself. Lisa Plowman, Aaron Briggs, the two people who are directly responsible for this, weren't even present at the hearing.
Yeah, and that's definitely tough to shake out. I know that we heard today that the county wasn't explicitly invited to the Coastal Commission hearing, so
Oh,
that is a point to make. But
we
the
didn't
other
even
part
know
of
they
that
were
is
going to
that
be
it's an
in
open
town.
public meeting, if it's your item. I mean, I was there because it's an item that I'm interested in. You would think that, you know, maybe one of them would have showed up as well, or stayed until the end to hear the decision for themselves. Um, but that just wasn't the case. So
Yeah, I think some enterprising young reporter needs to dig into what happened here exactly because and the thing is that's what Sable's hanging their hat on. It's like, oh, you don't have jurisdiction, and the county said it was fine. And
well, it's a
if
little
I'm the man from
interesting.
Mars and I read that, I'm like, yeah, maybe, yeah.
It's a little interesting because, they've gone into this settlement agreement that says the county has no permitting jurisdiction here, but Sable's relying on permits that the county gave them as basis for a lot of this. So that part of things is very odd, and a little bit backwards, but again, we're all still kind of trying to figure out what that means.
So
And
what's next?
well, next is the Regional Water Quality Control Board is having an enforcement hearing on April 17th because they issued a notice of violation to Sable for unauthorized discharge in waterways. I mean, even we have photos of like oil globs in ponds or, grease from various machines. So whether it's that or, some other sediment that I'm not aware of, that will be heard on April 17th. And they will also be considering a resolution to ask Attorney General Bonta for help with enforcement, which other people have done before in the past few weeks. And he's not gotten involved yet, so
Yeah,
we'll
he's
see.
kind of MIA in all this as
A little
well.
busy.
He's very busy for sure.
I guess, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It just the county thing baffles me. I mean, this is only the most important, urgent, consequential, and long-lasting public policy issue in Santa Barbara County. So why would the planning director want to show up to a thing like this? Josh, Lisa Plowman screwed the pooch with the whole housing element, and this is another botch job here. Somebody needs to look at this, and I strongly suggest it's you. Um, all right.
I want to cover 7 beats. That's my job. That's my goal. Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Just real quick, I just want to take note of the big hands off protest from last Saturday. I know some of you were out and about. Just an interesting note on this in terms of the media. Columbia Journalism Review has a piece today. This was front page news all over Europe, every major newspaper in Europe, but yet it was on page 18 of the Boston Globe, page 11 of the New York Times, and I don't even know if it made the Wall Street Journal. And it's just enraging. It makes me want to choke.
I had to fight to get it to the top story where I work, so it's not that much of a surprise.
I was wondering actually if you were going to cover it at all, or if there was some. No, never mind. All right. And then Margaux, I just want to note a related story you had this week. A prominent local law firm has joined in on the fight against the Trump administration, trying to tell big law firms who they can and cannot represent. Just say a word about that, if you would.
Yeah, definitely. Sanger Hanley has joined in on that. So that's, Bob Sanger, pretty big criminal defense guy in town. Um, and yeah, joined 503 other firms in support of Perkins Coie, who's, fighting the Trump administration a little bit right now. And it was interesting, I spoke to him on the phone and he was like, I never comment on cases. So this is, special that I'm here commenting on this one. He was like, this has nothing to do with partisan politics or what I believe or who I voted for, but this is about the integrity of the law and the rule of law. Um, and the Trump administration is trying to shift that around and change it and not respect it. And as a lawyer, that's not right.
Yeah, well,
I applaud them for that.
good for them. Although the idea that Sanger never comments on cases is kind of comical. Didn't he represent Michael Jackson at one point?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So he commented quite a bit about that. All right, let's talk about housing for a moment. Ryan and Josh, you both wrote about this. The Sears site of the massive development that's going to happen at La Cumbre Plaza was before the Planning Commission and did not get great reviews. What was the beef, Ryan?
And this is actually the smaller of two projects coming into La Cumbre. The other one's 640 units, I believe. And nobody's saying that housing doesn't belong at La Cumbre Plaza. I think all the planning commissioners know that we need housing. La Cumbre Plaza has been suffering for some time. For anybody who's been there, it's been kind of a desert. But I think they were picking apart the design is
Santa is still there. Right? I'm just telling you.
The design, I mean, it's very early design, but it's basic Santa Barbara, white stucco, red tile on a big building, and it doesn't have a lot of affordable housing. And what the big problem is right now is that, the state has streamlined things to make it easier to build housing as a way to get more affordable housing and, attack the housing crisis in the state. But what's happening is we're getting a lot of market rate housing. And that's what we're seeing with this 443 units is going to be 90% market rate. And so this Kennedy Wilson, to put in perspective, they own those townhomes across the street from Chick-fil-A over on State Street. And those rent for about 6,200 a month. And that's a two bedroom.
For a what? A one bedroom, two bedroom?
Yeah, and they're townhomes. That'd be a two bedroom, but still, this is the type of housing that we're going to see going into Macy's and Sears. And a lot of the planning commissioners are saying, that 10% of moderate income housing isn't enough. And that's not even for low income. That's for straight moderate, which in Santa Barbara, people who are making moderate can afford $4,000 or $5,000 a month in rent. So that's kind of the big problem. And the developers, they were very confident and, as long as we check the boxes.
Because of builder's remedy.
Yeah, we don't have to do much else. And the other big thing is Hope School District. They have about 900 students a year right now. And according to a report they published, it would add another, 500 plus students. That'd be 28 classrooms. And with the development fees, which are per square foot, that won't help the district much to meet that need. So, there's some big questions about this, and it's still early. There isn't an official project application, but once the application goes in, the city only has 5 hearings, and if it meets objective standards, they can't do much to stop it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, Josh, your story went into this issue of sort of coordinated planning between the Sears piece of it and the Macy's piece of it, and there isn't any. And there obviously should have been a specific plan. There is not. I mean, talk about that a little bit about why there isn't any coordinated planning and whether there's any chance for there to be some going forward.
Well, all of the problems that we're facing right now can be placed on the shoulders of former County Supervisor Doss Williams, who sabotaged the city of Santa Barbara's effort to have a specific plan. 2 subcommittees of the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments had recommended $1.1 million to help the city fund all of La Cumbre Plaza, a specific plan with the Taylor family, Kennedy Wilson. They were going to get more units as a holistic approach, 2,000 and much higher percentages of affordability. Doss Williams took campaign contributions from the Taylors in the past, and they worked behind the scenes leading up to that meeting to kind of sabotage the city planners. And then all of a sudden, and Randy was caught flat-footed, the mayor of Santa Barbara, he's on SBCAG, and then all of a sudden, mysteriously, they said no to $1.1 million to fund a coordinated effort. So what does that mean? That basically was, hey, I'm going to help these developers build as fast as they can and not get slowed down in the process. That's bad public policy because we could have had a holistic approach. What Ryan mentioned, totally correct. These are out of town Orange County developers. I get hesitant when they say things like Cali Real. They don't know where they're at. They're just here trying to build something big. This guy, this architect for them, very dismissive. He's like, I can't imagine those gas stations will be forever, or that veterinarian clinic's going to be there forever, talking about what's on Hope there and La Cumbre. And so they're very dismissive. So think about driving through La Cumbre Plaza right now. You can go in one end, you can go in any way, you can cross. Right now, as it's proposed, the Taylor family, who wants to knock down Macy's on that side, they're saying, no, you're not going to have access to our side of the mall and our housing development. That's bad. Right now, if we drove in, we passed the Habit, went over to Islands, places I go. It's a private lot, but anyone can drive there, right? It operates as a public lot. If they don't work this out together, it's going to be like driving through someone's residential neighborhood, with the exception of that strip that's going to stay where like Seas is and Panda Express. So it's a big jumbled mess, quite honestly.
You're saying I can still get to Chipotle?
You can still get to Chipotle from State Street, but you
Gotta go
can't
the
get it from
backside
the other
by
direction.
Bristol Farms.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was a low-income housing. Those
so
are
it's
the-
imagine like just this big sort of dump of housing with very little coordination. Now, the city planners are trying to. Jessica Grant, she said, we want this to be a place where there's mobility, there's still time, it's early. They want to be able to do all that, but it's a real frustrating situation for the planning commissioners who just laid in to these developers, and they should have. I mean, these are out of town developers who don't even know how to pronounce the names of streets, much less know what the needs of the community are.
Yeah, but they got the state on their side, so it doesn't. I mean, it's kind of like it's like
Yeah,
stable.
it's
It's
one of
just
those things where if you meet those objective boxes, there's little you can do to stop it. And them being on opposite sides of, you got Macy's on the north side and then Sears on the south side, and then there's this middle parcel that could be developed in the future. They're using that as a buffer of saying, well, it technically doesn't connect, so we can connect it later. We can do all that later. But there's a lack of due diligence, it seemed, going into that meeting, and that was what was getting called out.
yeah. And then real quick, Ryan, you had a little piece about two county-owned sites downtown that they're looking at for housing. Which are they?
Yeah, this has been kind of a Lower Cap's pet projects, since he's about a year and a half. And these are the two first, test projects, and that would be the probation building on Carrillo Street, and it's tucked right behind the Anacapa courthouse, and then the administration building downtown. Now, not the main office, the engineering, the human resources office, and then the main parking lot. And they're just underutilized spaces
On Anapamu or
on
where?
Anapamu, yeah. So the probation one would be the first one to happen. They're looking for requests for proposals, right away to turn that into housing. And that could be, that's a 1.5 acres. It could be up to 50, 60 units. And you go over there
And
to
it's
the
workforce. It's for workforce.
yeah, and this would be, it wouldn't be like this inclusionary where it'd be 10% affordable. They would want it all to be affordable, in different levels. They'd have the low income, the moderate, and the missing middle. It would kind of attack everything we needed to attack. And so that probation building could happen, right away. And that's to kind of prove how it would happen. The big question is how these things would be funded. They would most likely look to go private and see if any private developers are willing to, partner with the city to make this happen. But if that happens, that could introduce some market rate housing to make the ends meet. So there's a lot of unanswered questions, but for now, the probation one might happen right away, and then they're looking at the downtown admin building as a second project.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the problem is, yeah, it's annoying that the Orange County developers won't build more market rate, but I mean, more,
Portable.
yeah, affordable housing, but that's what the market, I mean, that's Henry.
Yeah, and that's two big barriers right there. Just, being the county, they can count on their project getting passed pretty quickly. And that land price, downtown Santa Barbara land, 2.5 acres at the admin building and 1.5 acres at probation, that's, a pretty penny. And that's what Steve Lavanino brought up. What if we just sold the property and used that to fund another project with X amount of dollars? But they're going to look into that. So they're going to look into what's the best way to go forward. But it is to get affordable workforce housing using the county land somehow.
And just to close the loop on that, Ryan gave Laura Capps credit, which she deserves. If you recall, in the release of the housing element, going back to Lisa Plowman, they decided they wanted to rezone everything around Goleta to build thousands of units and not look at their own property. And then Laura Capps, primarily Laura got
Yeah.
involved and said, "Hey, let's look at our own building." And so
She's
that's
definitely been
great.
ringing this gong for over a year and a half. Just, we can pony up and use our own lands. And I talked to her about, I think it was Fairfax County, Virginia, where they mandated that all government land should be at least considered for housing. And right now they have, I think, 120 a government center downtown that's going to be 120 units of affordable housing, and that's happening right now. And so she's kind of looking at other counties and seeing how they're doing it and how could we do that.
Unfortunately, Elon has fired all of the employees from Fairfax County, Virginia, but be that as it may. So Margaux, are you a big fan of Cookie Plug? Have you?
I've actually never been.
No, I haven't either. I am, but apparently it's quite a thing. And they're being
Believe what you read.
driven out, Josh, by mysterious political forces. What's the story there?
This
Mysterious.
is a crazy story
That's going to
because
be the best read story in news. I bet. I bet top
it
10.
is the most read story by far this week, according to Bill's analytics. But um, this is an outrageous story. Okay, so
Analytics. Yes.
I'll be knocking on your door for a job at the end of the day, Jerry. Come on. Okay, so um, all right, Cookie Plug has leased the building next to the former Fiesta 5 Theater for a year. The Santa Barbara International Film Festival, as we know, has taken over that building. The city owns three buildings. Metropolitan Theaters Corporation, bankruptcy, they're out. Film Festival comes in, they're going to make it a film center. Well, part of that involves a renovation. So they need to renovate that theater, the air conditioning, the heating, the pipes, the water needs a renovation. And so the city mysteriously sends a note to Annette Rodriguez from Cookie Plug and says, we're going to cancel your lease because she was a sublease of Metropolitan Theaters Corporation, and we're not going to give you a new lease. Okay. And so she had a 6-year lease. She painted all these murals on the inside because Cookie Plug is kind of originally an East Coast Notorious B.I.G. hip hop urban sort of rap sort of vibe. It's kind of a cool young place. The art's very cool in there. She's
That's why I figured Margaux must have been there because she's cool and young.
I've seen pictures now. It looks really cool on the inside.
She spent $12,000. All of a sudden, she has to move. But Ed France, who is he's been involved in nonprofits in the community. Now he's the downtown parking and plaza or State Street manager. He sends her a email, says basically good luck on your future endeavors. We hope Cookie Plug is successful, but we're not going to enter any sort of agreement with you, with no explanation. And I asked Ed, and he said, "Oh, I don't want to violate the privacy of the tenant." That whole thing. Meanwhile, the tenant's like telling me everything. So she's very upset. She's calling it basically like a renoviction. The city is renovating and they're just dumping her, saying you got to get out, and they're not even offering her $3,500 or any tenant displacement ordinance. And I think it's going to probably raise a larger issue here in the sense of Santa Barbara wants to have businesses that appeal to different types of demographics, generations on State Street. And she's the daughter of Joanne Keynes. She grew up here. She went to Santa Barbara High. She doubles as a nurse in Oxnard. So she owns this. She drives to Oxnard. She works as a nurse. She comes back in the evening, manages. Her mother was an educator. They have a building at La Cumbre named after her. And so it's kind of an awful situation. Now, of
Anybody
course,
getting on her side on council, or are they all intimidated by Roger?
I believe it's Wendy Santa Maria's district, so I've not heard anything in that regard. It is on the other side of State Street. Um, she said she's got a ton of feedback from the public. I know she's talking to attorneys. She feels that she's been wrong. The city basically says when Metropolitan Theaters Corporation went bankrupt and we decided not to renew the lease, that cancels all subleases. That's essentially their line. And what she's saying is, okay,
Sort
but
of like the flip side of Sable's permit, isn't it?
it's yeah, so it's very complicated. It's very complicated. She's very upset. I think sometimes the city thinks they can get away with things and push people around. Not all the city, not all city employees, but some individual departments because no one will complain. But if the media gets involved, if you're a local with resources and a connection,
Optics of this are
Yeah.
terrible. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, we want business on State Street. Oh, not that business. We don't want that business. I mean, it's awful. All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see if anybody jumps on. All right. Well, before we go, we want to wish all the best to Eric Friedman, Council Member Eric Friedman, who had some unfortunate health developments over the weekend, and he's recovering. We hope. What's the latest? Ryan, you talked to the family or his family, or read what they were posting anyway.
Yeah, it was a public statement that they released, and he's in good spirits. He's recovering. They're still asking for space at this time. They're asking everybody to get their hearts checked because Eric was young. Something like this,
Still
you know,
is.
it's always so unexpected. And then there's the background story of there was a big vote supposed to happen on Tuesday at City Council. So some people are getting a little antsy about that. That was something that council members put on the docket. I think back in February they wrote that two-person memo. So here we're nearly 3 months down the line.
Not going to change the vote, but that's
Yeah,
but yeah. Anyway, all the best to Eric and also to
definitely.
Celeste, Barber, who's a fan of the show. His mom. And finally, Josh, you've finally driven Ed St. George out of town, I see.
We finally, we're officially at odds. Only a matter of time. Yeah. Um, yeah. So Ed is trying to burn the house down, and he says he's leaving town to go focus on properties in the San Ynez Valley. So Ed is a very bombastic personality, and I think people are sort of feeling fed up with him and tired of him and kind of over his sort of speech when it comes to how bad Santa Barbara is, when a lot of people are trying to make Santa Barbara better, trying to improve Santa Barbara, recognizing that the housing situation is tough. So Ed has decided to sell his interest in some of his properties, including 711 Milpa Street, which
Yeah,
was
that's the big one. I mean,
so
he
there-
was right in the middle of the negotiating that.
That's already passed too, I believe.
Didn't they got a specific plan for that?
they had a development agreement, right?
Development agreement.
They came to terms. Ed got his gem. They got a couple more units. But then he just decided to, I mean, to be honest, I'm a journalist. I don't believe anyone. And so, the story is that Ed just decided to get out, and Alan Bleeker said, "Great, we'll buy you out." It's shovel ready. They're looking for a developer. They may try to do it themselves. Of course, everything is more expensive than it was 5 years ago. Ed's trying to sell properties on San Andreas Street. He's trying to get out. He still owns Beach City, of course. He's kind of fallen out of favor in a lot of different ways with community people who are willing to give him a little bit of an advantage. And I think he's found a little bit more of a developer friendly attitude.
Well, Alejandro was tight with him, so that's one connection that's certainly.
Yeah, I left out of my story a lot of the blasting he was doing of various individuals by name, just because. But I mean, he is not happy with new council members or
Yeah, I
sort of.
believe he said. I believe he
What
called them
was it he said? He said
activist
Megan
council
Harmon
members
should stay
turning
home with
Santa
her
Barbara
kids.
into
Remember
San
that one?
Francisco.
Oh.
We really need to bring that up, Jerry. Come on.
Wow. All right, Margot, what are you working on? You're going to be stuck forever with Sable or you have anything else that you?
Probably no, a little more Sable, little UC stuff going on. Gonna follow up on the
Yeah, a
hiring.
little bit. Yeah.
It's a little bit of a mess, the UC system right now. So hoping to kind of sort some of that stuff out, see where they're gonna cave and see where
They're going to cave or not cave.
if they're going to. Some things we'll see.
All right, Ryan, what do you got?
Still covering stuff at the city council and trying to do some more follow-up work on immigration. We've seen it die down a little bit as far as activity, ICE in Santa Barbara County and arrests. We haven't seen as many arrests, but the fear is still there. The rhetoric that we see, we've seen student visas getting pulled, so immigration is still number one target for this administration. It's just we've seen them have a little bit more trouble on the ground. So some more reporting about that.
Okay. All right. Good enough. All right. Josh Molina, Ryan P. Cruz, and Margaux Lovely. Thank you all for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you all for watching. We will see you next time on Newsmakers.
Thank you.